am Jackie Fuchs, and I will be reading The Bystander Effect. The night Kitty Genovese was killed, 38 people did nothing. It was the middle of the night in March 1964. Catherine, who later became known as Kitty, was coming home from her late-night bartending job. In the 20 feet between her car and the apartment building, a stranger attacked her with a knife. The screams woke several neighbors. Irene Frost heard a shriek. She looked out the window and found a woman lying down and crying out. Perhaps she returned to bed. Perhaps she put a pillow over her head to block out the sound. Robert Moser called down from the 7th floor, "Hey, let that girl alone." Watching the attacker run away, he probably thought he'd done his good deed. He may have returned to bed feeling like a hero, as if he accomplished something. When the police didn't come, the assailant returned and continued to stab Kitty. She tried to get away, crying, "I'm dying, I'm dying." Perhaps some people were worried that they would be targeted as well. Some must have thought that it was just a lover's quarrel or a fight between friends. Perhaps they believed that someone else was calling the police. Honestly, someone else should be taking care of this problem. Above the dying women, lights in apartments came on and faces pressed to the glass not to look below. Not seeing anything because of the angle of the window or the shadow hiding the attack, many returned to bed. No one left their homes. On the 6th floor, Marjorie and Samuel Koshkin were arguing. "We should call the police," Samuel insisted. But Marjorie put the phone back in the cradle. There must have been 30 calls already. The cries faded with the footsteps of the man running away. Maybe the residents thought that the woman had escaped. As the door of the apartment building closed, the assumption held some merit. Carl Ross on the 2nd floor called a friend in Nassau County for advice. "What do you think I should do?" With his friend's agreement, Carl called the police at 3:50 a.m., 32 minutes after the first scream. The police arrived 3 minutes later to discover Kitty's body in her foyer. She had been stabbed multiple times, raped, and robbed. She died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. It was reported that if the police were called immediately in the first scream, Kitty would not have died. An anonymous neighbor reportedly stated, "I thought they were some kids having fun." It's none of my business. Many neighbors and residents of Walnut Avenue in Antioch, California, responded the same when asked about the Gardito home. The backyard was cluttered and messy, with random tents and buildings as permanent structures. Around the same time that J.C. Dugard disappeared, an 8-foot-tall fence appeared overnight separating the Garditos from the neighbors. Polly White recalled, "It was just there one day." About a year before Philip and Nancy Gardito were arrested, Polly saw a little girl peek through a broken part of the fence. "Hi, honey, how are you?" Polly inquired. "I'm fine," she responded shyly before running away. The next day, the hole in the fence was fixed and Polly didn't see the young girl again, at least not until the rescue. Although Philip was on the list of sex offenders, Polly and her husband Dale were reassured by the parole officer's bi-monthly visit. Damon Robinson, another neighbor, had called about the young girls who were seen playing in the Garditos' backyard. Reportedly, the police didn't find anything. "I don't feel no guilt," Damon told the reporter after JC's rescue. "Whoever the cop was, he didn't look at it thoughtfully. This was just a case that cost innocent lives." Even though Damon and other neighbors felt uneasy and didn't trust Philip, for 18 years no one called the authorities about the unusual home. Even after hearing strange moans and a voice pleading stop, Damon didn't call the police. Instead, he kept his distance from the odd neighbors, saying, "I don't want to speculate." It was the first really nice day in April. The sun was out, it was nearly 70 degrees, and people were walking around without coats or sweaters. So was I. Coming back from my internship, and with a new bag of cheese puffcorn procured from Rainbow Foods nearby, I sat on the bus stop bench to wait for the 84 to arrive. According to my phone app, it would be about 8 minutes. It was so beautiful outside, and I had new headphones that actually carried music to my ears, so I was happy to wait. Snacking on the puffs, I glanced at my phone. Just as I was thinking of taking my Kindle out to continue reading Welcome to the Monkey House, a bus pulled to the curb. But since it was a 21, I ignored it and continued digging in my purse. Wah! The child's cry caught my attention, even through the noise-canceling earbuds. 2 children, a boy and a girl, stepped off the bus and had found large puddles caused by the disintegrating snowbank. I assumed their mother or guardian would come up behind them, but I kept idly watching in case the children ran into the street or tripped on the uneven cement. They looked about the same age, maybe 2 or 3, and somewhat similar. Perhaps they were twins. The boy, the one who let out the cry, turned away from the bus and faced me. He had blood dripping from his nose, and there was a smear on his forehead and by his ear. The front of his shirt was wet with snot and spit and blood. A towering woman, around 300 pounds, bumbled out the door. She wore gray sweatpants and was clutching a half-filled bottle of water. "Over here," she said to the children and plopped next to me on the bench. I imagined that they were her grandchildren. Still crying, the boy followed the dazed little girl over to the woman, but he didn't step close enough. "Get over here." He let his legs bend and fell to the ground, still bawling, with blood dripping from his nose. I felt my lips curve in a frown and my heart reaching out for this scared and injured child. "God damn it, Trevor!" Like the others waiting at the stop, I was shocked at the ire in this woman's voice. I spun to look at her, my words of comfort stifled behind the knot that grew in my throat. "He's bleeding," a kind man, perhaps in his 40s, perhaps a father himself, pleaded with the woman. "I know he's bleeding." With an impatient grunt, the woman stood from her seat and leaned over the little boy. As she bent over the child, the crotch of her sweatpants spread, only a few feet from my face. Menstrual stains darkened the crevice. With one last look at the little girl cowering by the bench, I stood and walked to the shelter. The man offered the woman some tissue to clean the boy's face. Under the pretense of looking for the time the bus should arrive, I turned my back on the scene. "Did that boy fall down?" a woman in her early 50s inquired. "I don't know, I didn't see it." It was all I could offer as I kept my face averted and my eyes down. The woman started talking about the weather. Along with music still playing through the earbuds in my ears, I couldn't focus on what the woman was saying. My mind kept whirling with the questions. Why didn't I say anything? What if he was being abused or neglected? I turned back to the bench. Behind the 21s, still parked at the stop, the 84 drove up. "Oh, here it is!" Even I could hear the fake cheer in my voice. Stepping on the bus, I noticed several empty seats, but I had also noticed the woman and the two children heading towards the 84 as well. I left the roomier front seats open where I assumed the woman would sit. I intentionally took a back seat. Other people refused to make eye contact with the crying child and irate woman. She sat in the front and pulled the boy next to her on the bench. As we left the curb, music continued in my ears, and my eyes watched the sidewalks as we drove by. I could still hear the boy crying through my earbuds when I got off 3 stops later.